Okay, you should be the host.
Cool. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep,
Say wild herbalism.
it sure
Yes.
does.
Cool, cool. Well, let me pull up the chat over here so I can see it. Yeah. See if you have any questions as we go through, you can type it into the chat. I'll be responding in there as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Perfect.
So as you can see, this presentation is called Wild Herbalism. It's a presentation on wild foraged medicinal plants. We're going to be covering the different uses for common plants in North America that have medicinal use. So just to begin with, here's some notes on sustainability, which is always important to keep in mind when foraging. Foraging wild plants inherently has an environmental impact due to the removal of a natural element from the ecosystem. There are a few steps that we can take to mitigate that impact and ensure that future generations can be passed the knowledge of wild medicine. Some herbs that are going to be covered in this class, such as burdock, are highly invasive noxious weeds. Removing these plants from the local environment allows native plants to better compete for resources. Be mindful of your environment. If you only see one milkweed growing along a trail, encourage it to prosper rather than foraging it so that next season your harvest can be more fruitful. And never harvest more of a plant than is needed for the plant to survive when possible. Of course, for some of our like root vegetables, that's not possible. So you have to be careful of how much you're pulling out of an area. You don't want to decimate an area. And another important part here is if the natural and biodiverse areas you forage are threatened by encroachment, it is your responsibility to get involved. If you are taking from the environment and then that environment becomes threatened, it's your responsibility to do anything you can about that. So some notes on medical advice. I am not a medical professional. I do not hold any degree in medicine from any accredited institution. The medical advice offered in this class, while oftentimes being used in folk remedies for centuries, should never be held to a higher standard than what is given to you by your doctor. Many of the remedies discussed in this class have incredible amounts of research by accredited institutions to back them up. However, that is not a replacement for FDA approval and regulation. If you have access to professional medical help, always consult your physician before engaging in any form of regular herbal regimen, especially if you are taking a prescription medicine so that drug interaction can be taken in consideration. Taking an interest in your own health and well-being is one of the best reasons to delve into herbalism, but don't let that be a detriment to your health. The next piece here is, where can I forage? Anywhere. Well, almost anywhere. If you are foraging in a park or a trail, make sure you check the regulations with the appropriate governmental body beforehand. Avoid any at-risk plants in the area and get any permits that must be acquired. For example, in Colorado state parks where I'm located, you can't forage in a state park. Aside from noxious weeds, no state park is going to let you forage there. However, you can get a permit in a national forest. You get that from the federal government. And so you should know where you're going and know who's in charge of that area. Because what you don't want is to get slapped with a really big fine for foraging in a state park or in an area where you're not allowed to be. The best place to forage, really, like as far as having control over what you can and can't do, is private land. If you have a friend out in the mountains that has a little bit of land or something like that. But if you're going onto private land, you do want to make sure that you have permission from the landowner at all times. Keep an eye on where those property lines are. If you're foraging in an urban environment, Be mindful of any chemicals such as pesticides, herbicides, or other pollutants that could taint your harvest. So should I worry about poisonous plants when I'm foraging? You should absolutely be mindful at all times of common poisonous plants in your area. Do not harvest any plant that you cannot accurately identify. If you do not feel 100% comfortable in your identification of a plant, don't pick it. There's really no need to. Take a bunch of photos of it. Maybe take like a small sample of it if you want to analyze it like later and look at your field guide or look up some stuff online or ask any of the various social media groups and stuff out there dedicated to identification of plants. But don't just harvest it. I see a lot of people pick a whole bunch of some red berry and then be like, hey, can I eat this? No, it's poison. Why'd you pick an entire bucket full of it? Some herbs have poisonous lookalikes that must be taken into consideration in your foraging. And again, do not pick anything you cannot positively identify. Over here on the right, we've got a few common poison plants. Each of these plants produces what's called a contact dermatitis. So some plants like poison sumac, poison oak, and poison ivy secrete a chemical on the surface of their leaves that when you rub against it causes an itchy rash called a contact dermatitis. And here in Colorado, we definitely have poison ivy. I haven't seen a whole lot of poison oak or sumac. That doesn't mean it's not out there. But you should just know the plants in the area that you are going to. So what do I need to get started in foraging? Well, you can just go outside today and get started. There's a few tools that make foraging much easier. A cloth sack or a basket to keep your harvest in is an important piece. I definitely prefer using a cloth sack or a basket versus like a plastic bag. It's a lot harder to lose a basket or a cloth bag. And B, it keeps your harvest a little drier. A lot of times when you pick fresh herbs, they're going to sweat a little bit into a plastic bag, and that can cause them to wilt. Whereas in a basket, they're more likely to just dry a little bit, and that's just kind of a little bit better for a lot of herbs or mushrooms or anything like that. A small knife or a pair of gardening shears will allow you to cleanly trim plants. Making like a clean cut on the area of the plant that you're trying to harvest keeps the plant a little bit healthier. It's a lot easier for the plant to heal a clean cut than it is like a traumatic ending of a stem. So don't like pinch it off with your fingers. If you can, cut it with a little shear. A pair of gardening gloves to avoid stickers or thorns, a bit of thread to tie together bundles of herbs. You can see they tied together these spruce boughs over here. It just helps you keep your stuff separated so that way when you come home, your basket isn't just full of a bunch of random stuff. You can keep it somewhat organized. A small trowel for roots, and your trusty local plant identification guide. Here's a few of my favorite guides. The Complete Guide to Edible Wild Plants, Mushrooms, Fruits, and Nuts by Katie Letcher-Lyle is a really good book. It's got all sorts of different really cool stuff from all over North America. And it covers a lot of the same kind of plants that we're going to be covering in this book. And it also gives you some recipes and how to cook some of the plants. Edible and Medicinal Plants of the West by Gary L. Tilford is another really great book. And it covers a lot of the medicinal aspects of things. And then I also included Peterson's guide here. Peterson has tons and tons of field guides. And you can find, this one is East and Central North America, but you can find them for pretty much every region. Northwest, Southwest. Peterson even makes guides like specific to states. They're very good. So let's get started. Let's start talking about some plants. First one we're going to talk about is yarrow. Yarrow is native to Europe and Western Asia, and it's become naturalized in many parts of the world. The leaves contain achillitin and achillin. These are astringents that encourage the coagulation of blood, and astringent is something that helps stop bleeding. If you're bleeding from a wound in the wilderness, the bleeding can be stopped by making a simple poultice of yarrow on a stone. You want to use these feathery fern-like leaves of the yarrow here. You'll make a simple poultice of the yarrow on a stone and then add that mash over the wound inside of a bandage. That will stop the bleeding. That'll get all the astringent chemicals there. A nosebleed can be encouraged to stop by stuffing a nostril with a yarrow leaf. And the flowers act as an effective diaphoretic and anti-catarrhal, as well as an appetite stimulant when consumed as a tea. So what that means is it helps to reduce fever by bringing your body temperature to like a normal range. And it acts as an appetite stimulant. So if you have a cold or something like that, it's really good to take yarrow. 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried flour or 1 disc of fresh flour to 1 cup of boiling water 3 times a day will help to sweat out a cold and reduce the symptoms of a fever. So to identify yarrow, basically what you're looking at is it has these little feathery fern-like leaves, and this is its first stage of life. And then towards the end of the growing season, a spike will come up the middle and end with a big disc of these white flowers here as an adult. Both stages of life are perfectly fine for picking for any of these uses, but of course the flowers are only available in the second stage, and the leaves are a bit more plentiful in that first stage. So here's a little thing on yarrow poultice. Please tell me if you can hear this. If you can't hear it, let me know in the chat, please.
It's hard enough to be lost in the desert, but what can you do?
So guys, can you hear that? Okay. Screwed it up. Hold on. I do this every time I use Zoom. Give me 1 second. I've got to stop sharing for a moment. And then do this. Okay. We're gonna try that again.
It's hard enough to be lost in the desert, but what can you do for injuries like deep cuts?
Cool.
The American Southwest is like nature's pharmacy. It's home to any number of wild medicinal plants, but one of the most versatile is yarrow. Now, to use it, I'm gonna make what's called a poultice. It's kind of like a crude paste. To do that, I'm gonna mix in just a little bit of water. And I'm just gonna use the handle of my knife to grind this up. Now you can see as I'm grinding up this paste, it's breaking up those leaves and it's releasing all of those medicinal properties that we're looking for. What I would do is I would take this poultice, I'd put it right on top of that wound. It's gonna help disinfect it, and it's gonna help stop the blood flow if it's bleeding. And now, right on top of that is I'm gonna wrap a bandage. A yarrow poultice like this will go a long way to help the healing and stave off infection.
So yeah, here's some like field herbalism from the Weather Channel. The Weather Channel actually has a really cool series called SOS, How to Survive, that's got a lot of like ditch medicine in it. But that is how you would use a yarrow poultice.
It's hard enough to be lost in the desert.
Next plant we're going to talk about is one that pretty much everybody knows, dandelions. One of the most common garden weeds. Dandelion has numerous medicinal uses. There's chicoraic and chlorogenic acid found in dandelion. It helps to stabilize blood sugar and inhibit the creation of carbohydrate storage hormones. So if you eat too many carbohydrates, your body wants to store that for later use as a lipid, as a fat. And so it secretes these carbohydrate storage hormones, and that tells the body, store these carbohydrates as fats. If we want to prevent that from happening, chicoraic and chlorogenic acid can help to prevent the body from producing the carbohydrate storage hormones in as much quantity as it does. So you can kind of have your cake and eat it too a little bit more. Also, the high folate content of dandelion protects against DNA mutation, which can lead to certain cancers and lowers cholesterol. There are bioactive polyphenols in dandelion that have been shown to reduce gastric inflammation caused by many chronic diseases. These are things like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, IBS. The polyphenols in dandelion can help to reduce the inflammation caused by those diseases. And to really get the most out of dandelion, we want to use the roots for that. So making dandelion coffee is really one of the best ways to get all that chlorogenic acid and chicoraic acid and stuff. So what you'll need is some dandelion root. You want to clean it and trim off the little ends, keep that big tap root in the middle of it. And then you can just do this with dandelion root, but I like to add some cinnamon, cardamom, and fennel to mine as well. You'll collect all of your ingredients, wash your dandelion root, trim the bits off of it, leaving the large root down the middle. And now I hear this part two ways, and you can try it either way and do whatever tastes better to you. I cut my taproot first into 1/4-inch segments and then put them into the oven for 350 degrees for 40 minutes. Other people think that makes it too dark. And so if you prefer a lighter roast, then don't cut it. Just roast it and then cut it after you take it out of the oven. So it'll cook less all the way through. You'll add 2 teaspoons of roasted dandelion root and other spices to 2 cups of boiling water. Brew that for about 10 to 15 minutes. It's called a decoction. It's kind of like a very, very strong tea like coffee is. This tastes very similar to coffee. And if you've ever had like Café du Monde coffee, like in Louisiana, that has chicory in it, which also contains chicoraic acid and tastes very similar to dandelion. So moving on to burdock. Burdock is a noxious and invasive weed in North America. Burdock originated in Europe and it came to the US via livestock. The tap root of burdock, this big root, is the primary part of the plant used for medicinal purposes. To prepare burdock, you'll harvest the root and then cut into small pieces. Then dry the pieces in a dehydrator or in the sun for several days. You can also roast it like you would dandelion root. That's another way that you can do this. Inside the root, there are flavonoids and tannins such as arctin and antibiotic polyacetylenes present in the root, as well as moisturizing mucilage. These things together, the tannins and the antibiotics and the mucilage, make burdock a really prime plant for treating skin disease like eczema and acne. Drinking burdock root tea also has been associated with reducing glucose spikes in people with diabetes. There are some compounds inside of burdock that help to regulate the blood sugar levels by binding to sugars. Burdock's identifiable by these big arrow-like leaves. So it has these huge fuzzy leaves and it kind of looks like a lot like rhubarb. like a wild rhubarb. Can you make it into a balm for skin? Yes, you absolutely could make it into a balm for skin. I'm gonna actually show you real quick how to make a toner out of it for your face. And you can make that, you can take this same you can take the same infusion and add that to wax to make a balm. Or a better way to maybe even do it would be to infuse a carrier oil with burdock over time. So you could take the dried burdock root cut up, add that to a jojoba oil or something that's like a carrier oil, and then leave it on the windowsill for about a month. It takes a long time to infuse oils from dry herbs. And then you'll take that and slowly add beeswax to it in like a double boiler. And you'll get a really nice balm for the skin out of that as well. We're actually going to show how to make a balm from a couple other plants a little bit later on, but this would make a really good one. So you take your dried burdock root though for the toner, a large pot and a few cotton pans. You're going to make an infusion. So you'll make a tea basically of burdock with 1 teaspoon of burdock root per cup of boiling water. Simmer it for about 15 minutes, strain out the solids and set it in the refrigerator and let it get nice and cool. That's then good, like shelf stable for about a week. You can go and take that, dip cotton pad in it, and then use that as a toner for your skin. Really get a lot out of those acids and the antibiotic polyphenols that are present in burdock. The mucilage that's in the root will also like leave some mucilage on your skin, which is very moisturizing. It'll have a humectant sort of property to it. And use the leaves or anything, or just the root. You can eat the leaves, but I think they taste terrible. And I take the stems and I actually cut them in about 1/2-inch segments and boil them for about 20 minutes, coat them in breadcrumbs, and then fry them. And that's really tasty. It's like vegan nuggets. Okay, so moving on to pineapple weed. So pineapple weed is a common garden weed. This thing grows out of cracks in sidewalks. This grows absolutely everywhere in urban environments, especially if you are out in nature. You can often, whoops, let me go back one. You can oftentimes find pineapple weed growing where a lot of people have walked on desire paths or trails. And it is actually a wild primitive chamomile. So this is a type of chamomile flower, and you can use it very similarly to chamomile. It contains the compound apigenin, which binds to specific receptors in the brain, which reduce anxiety and help to initiate sleep. Exactly the same as chamomile does, like German chamomile that you get in the store. It also contains the volatile oil proazolines and the bioflavonoid rutin, which have been shown to have anti-inflammatory effects and increase the bioavailability of vitamin C. The most common, someone said fuck yeah concrete with the pineapple weed. The most common method of ingestion is as a tea, just like chamomile, although a tincture could be prepared for a more expedited effect if you're going to try to isolate the actual anti-anxiety component of pineapple weed. But it's a really nice before bed tea. It's a really nice, I work from home, so sometimes I'm just stressed in my own home and you gotta like relax for a moment. This is a good way to end my day, is with a pineapple weed tea. I find it to be more calming than regular chamomile. It also has a stronger taste, more of like a pineapple taste actually, and smell. If you take one of these flowers and you crush it a little bit in your hand and then smell it, it smells just like pineapple. And that's how you really know that you've got the right plant there. But this is absolutely everywhere. Just wash it real good before you make tea out of it. because it likes where people step and dogs pee and stuff. Pineapple weed tea is the best thing to do with this. Just fresh or dry pineapple weed in hot water. Steep it for 10 minutes, similar to any other domesticated chamomile. A stronger tea is going to have a stronger sedative effect. Oh, a tincture. What is a tincture? A tincture is an infusion, but instead of in water, it's done usually in alcohol, although you can make tinctures out of some strong like vinegars and acids. When we talk about tinctures in this class, we'll be talking about an alcohol tincture though. To make a tincture, all you do is add dry herbs to like Everclear in a dropper bottle and let that sit for about a month. Shake it every once in a while. You've got yourself a tincture of an herb. And what that does is it concentrates any of the compounds in there that are going to be alcohol soluble. So you'll use a water tincture, a tea, or a water infusion, a tea for any of your water soluble chemicals. You'll use a tincture with alcohol for alcohol soluble chemicals, and you will use a carrier oil like jojoba for an infusion for anything that's fat soluble. So the next plant we're going to talk about is broadleaf plantain. It is not related to the cousin of the banana. This is another plant that grows absolutely everywhere, and especially where people walk. It's another common garden weed. It was called white man's footprint by the indigenous people of North America, because it was spread across North America unintentionally by European colonizers. One of the most prolific invasive weeds. It originated in Asia, actually, but it is now found on every continent. The leaves have numerous medicinal properties, and that being said, care has to be taken with these because some people get a very rare contact dermatitis allergy to the leaves, similar to poison ivy. So before you do anything with these, you should just grab one and rub it on your skin and then see if it gives you a rash. It's really the only way to check unless you want to get weird blood work done by a doctor. But testing it on your skin first is going to be better than getting a rash on like the inside of your throat. And so do that. You don't have to do that every time. Just do it once. And if you don't get a rash, you're good for broadleaf plantain forever after that, pretty much. So broadleaf plantain medicinal uses. The leaves of broadleaf plantain possess anti-inflammatory phytochemicals that have been found to reduce the symptoms of chronic inflammation more safely than acetaminophen and ibuprofen-based medicines. So the National Center for Biotechnology Information produced a study in 2015 showing that a tea made from broadleaf plantain significantly reduced markers of liver injury caused by overuse of acetaminophen in rats. So acetaminophen and ibuprofen is not good for your liver. The type of medicine that those are as a blood thinner is not good for your liver. And so broadleaf plantain is a pretty good anti-inflammatory that's like taking a low dose of aspirin, and it reduces pain more safely though than something like acetaminophen or ibuprofen. And it's also really good for the liver. So it actually can reduce markers of liver injury caused by the use of acetaminophen. The tea is traditionally used in recovery from dysentery due to its nutrient density, that's diarrhea. It'll help return vital minerals and vitamins gently to the body. And the crushed dried leaves, when orally consumed, raw or in a tea, have been approved in Europe as a bronchodilator. So what a bronchodilator is, it means it opens up the air pathways in the lungs So if you're sick and you're throwing up, you're coughing and stuff like that, broadleaf plantain can kind of reduce some of that pain. It can return some vital minerals and electrolytes to the body, and it'll help open up those air pathways as well in the lungs. So moving on to wild catnip. This is more of a mountain plant, but here in Colorado where I am, this grows like a weed pretty much everywhere, and especially underneath like evergreen trees, mixed evergreen trees, different kinds of pine and stuff. It loves to grow underneath those. It's common throughout the western United States in forested areas, also especially in riparian areas, along streams, areas of highly available water. Catnip tea has a soothing effect on people similar to chamomile and can gently quell anxiety. Also, so you can make a tea out of it and use it that way, or a tincture. But the more useful, in my opinion, use of wild catnip is the neptolactone, which is the volatile oil in catnip that is a stimulant for cats, is actually a very effective insect repellent. That's why the catnip produces it. Catnip oil is more effective than DEET and is much, much gentler on native flora and fauna when it's eventually reintroduced to the environment. So whenever you put anything on your skin and you go out into the environment, you go out into the woods, anything that you put on your skin is going to make its way to the environment. Your skin flakes off constantly and you're going to rub against a tree and all that kind of stuff. So if you're wearing these like really harsh chemicals like DEET, and you're rubbing up against different trees and plants and your skin flakes are falling off and all that kind of stuff, you're just shedding all those chemicals out into the environment, which is a poison. So wild catnip insect repellent. Here's how you make it. We're gonna use a tincture. What you need is a bunch of fresh wild catnip leaves, 100 proof alcohol such as Everclear, some kind of jar, and a spray bottle. So what we're going to do is finely chop the leaves and stems of wild catnip, fill your jar about halfway to the top, and then fill the jar the rest of the way up with alcohol and cap. Leave it in a cool, dark place for 1 month. Every week or so, take the jar and shake it a bit. Then you'll fill your spray bottle for your tincture about halfway with the tincture and about halfway with water. Shake it up and you can mist it right onto your skin. So yeah, mist it onto the skin to apply, reapply after sweating profusely or getting your skin wet. This will keep bugs off of you. It will keep the mosquitoes off of you in the summertime and in the springtime. It's a pretty useful little insect repellent. If you spray it on the outside of your tent, it'll keep bugs out of your tent. It's a lot better than DEET. So the next thing we're going to talk about is bee balm. Bee balm is these pretty purple flowers. They are all over the mountainous regions of the US, from Appalachia to here in the Rockies and the Cascades. They love cool meadows in the mountains. And they are also commonly grown in urban and suburban areas in gardens as a pollinator. So you can oftentimes get seeds for these. And there's lots of different domestic varieties of bee balm that are very showy and very cool for your garden, that you could still use for the medicinal effects that it has. Bee balm has a very long history as a medicinal herb with a variety of uses. Some of them are ancient Roman uses, some of them are different, old European uses, mostly. The first thing here is an oxymel. Oxymel is a like an ancient Greek cough syrup. So this is what, if you had a cough in ancient Greece, and you went and saw like Pliny the Elder or something like that, they would give you an oxymel. An oxymel is a mix of honey, herbs, and vinegar. It's used traditionally to treat respiratory ailments orally, similar to how we use cough syrup. So it's herbs that are meant to sort of clean the airways and the pathways, especially the throat. This is really good for a sore throat. Bee balm oxymel should be taken in 1 tablespoon doses 3 times a day during a cold to reduce symptoms or as needed to reduce a sore throat. To make the oxymel, in a jar, you'll combine equal parts finely chopped bee balm flowers and leaves, honey, and apple cider vinegar. Seal the jar, leave it in a cabinet for a month. All that stuff's going to really blend together and sort of ferment a bit. Take it out after a month, open the jar, give it a really good stir, and then you have your oxymel. And it will reduce the symptoms of sore throat, and it'll keep you from coughing as much when you have a cold, or COVID, I guess. So next one here is using bee balm as a salve. Bee balm is naturally high in thymol. Thymol is an antiseptic that has a cooling topical effect, similar to like menthol. This makes bee balm a very useful herb for treating burns topically. So to make a salve from bee balm for a burn, you'll infuse some kind of non-comedogenic carrier oil, such as I like to use jojoba oil. You can get that online. You can get that just raw jojoba oil from like Whole Foods. I think Sprouts even has some that you can just buy raw jojoba. And yeah, so you're gonna get your jojoba oil, fill a jar with the finely chopped bee balm flowers and leaves, leaving about 2 inches of space at the top. Pour your oil over the herbs until the jar is filled to 1 inch from the top. Place the jar on a sunny windowsill for about 3 to 6 weeks. And that is going to infuse that oil. Oil infusions take a long time. It's going to make a nice, tasty oil. And then to make a salve out of that oil, you'll add 1 ounce of beeswax per 8 ounces of oil. You can blend it. The better thing to do is to use a double boiler and just slowly add your beeswax in a double boiler. And that's going to give you the best results. Another use of bee balm is as a tea. Bee balm tea has been used for centuries as a tonic for upset stomach and menstrual pain. Bee balm tea has an antispasmodic effect on the gastric system, so it helps to ease stomach cramps. It'll kind of calm the bowels and you're having stomach cramps. To make a bee balm tea, simply add 1 tablespoon of dried flower petals to every cup of boiling water, steep for about 15 minutes. Here we can see that they are using not the bright light purple bee balm flowers that you would find in a mountain meadow, but these are a more dark red domestic varietal of bee balm here. And like I said, you can get all sorts of different colors of these flowers, and they're really, really good addition to a garden. So next we're going to talk about the resin of the spruce tree. So the resin of the evergreen tree spruce can be collected year-round from the bleeds in the bark of the tree. This is a bleed here. So when the tree bark gets cut or is damaged in some way, this looks like a branch probably cracked off. The resin seeps out of the inner bark of the tree and seals off this. Yeah, this is like the only incense I use now. I know, it's amazing. It's a great incense. And it seals off the ends here. This resin is a very effective antimicrobial ingredient that can be used in various topical salves. According to the National Library of Medicine, when applied topically, spruce resin exhibits a bacteriostatic effect on all tested gram-positive bacteria, as well as some gram-negative bacteria. The study also showed that spruce resin was effective at inhibiting the growth of MRSA and VRE, which are two very antibiotic-resistant diseases. This doesn't mean that this will kill every single infection that you get, but what it does do is it makes a very difficult environment for bacteria to grow. And so before you get an infection, if you use this balm, it will keep an infection from forming because it'll make a hostile environment for the bacteria to try to reproduce it. If you already have an infection, this will help to keep it contained. That's why it's called bacteriostatic as opposed to antibacterial. It doesn't kill anything, but it does make a very difficult environment for it to spread. Now, like Alex said in the chat, the resin itself can be burned as an incense. It'll make your whole house smell really fresh and foresty and awesome. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but I prefer to use spruce resin. It does burn forever. It's really, really good. And I prefer to use this as opposed to something like smudging with white sage. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But let's talk about making a spruce resin salve. So to use that bacteriostatic effect of spruce resin, take about a quarter cup of spruce resin, half a cup of some sort of non-comedogenic oil, olive oil, almond oil, jojoba oil, and about 1.5 ounces of beeswax, grated. The more wax you use will make a more firm salve. So if you want to spread more of the ingredient onto something, but you'll have to replace it more, make a more soft salve. And if you, with less beeswax in it, and if you want more of something that is going to just stay on the skin for a long time and act kind of like a sunscreen or whatever, you want to add more beeswax and make a more firm salve. Strain out your solids, heat up your resin in a double boiler and the oil, and you don't have to infuse this for a long time because the resin will dissolve right into the oil. And then so you simmer that on low heat until the resin fully melts, strain out the solids, return it to the double boiler, and then slowly add your beeswax until all the beeswax is melted into the mixture. Pour it into these little tins. You can get these tins on Amazon. You can also get them at like any herb shop. If you're here in Denver where I'm at, Herbs and Arts is a really good place to go that has all this stuff. Pour it into little tins or jars, store it in a cool, dry place, and you'll apply it directly to burns to protect against infection. So using spruce resin as an incense. Let's talk a little bit about the problems of using white sage. And you can see some white sage back here in this photo. White sage is a sacred plant to a lot of indigenous cultures, especially the Northern Plains tribes, that use this plant as part of a specific ritual called smudging. Now, the act of smudging is a very specific ritual, and it's a very part of tribal culture ritual, and it is kind of offensive to just purchase white sage at a store and then use that to smudge your house of bad spirits and stuff. Smudging is what a specific practice is called. And so smoke cleansing is something that's used in cultures all over the world. Smoke cleansing is not like a closed practice. It's a practice that's done in many different ways across many different cultures. I mean, I have some thieves oil going in a essential oil diffuser next to me right now, and it's going all over my room and sort of cleansing the room as a smoke cleansing. Spruce is a really good plant for that, and it's a good plant to replace something like sage if you're regularly using sage, because also that white sage, it doesn't do well in a commercial environment, in an agricultural environment. So a lot of the white sage that you get from the store is wild foraged and not in a sustainable way. To use spruce resin as an incense, it's very simple. You'll just heat up an incense coal or a hookah coal on the stove, or if it's self-lighting, you can just use a lighter. Transfer it to a heat-resistant tray. This is a sensor here. This is one type of heat-resistant tray. You could also just use a metal tray, and over here you can see these are the kinds of self-lighting coals, these hookah coals. You'll drop your resin on top of the coal and just allow it to smoke. Raw resin is much, much stronger than stick incense, and it's best carried around the house to help spread the smoke around. That smoke will settle tiny little microscopic bits of soot all over everything. It's not, you're not going to see it, but what it carries with it is that bacteriostatic chemicals in the spruce resin. And so that will settle kind of all over the place. And it's a way of sort of cleansing your environment. So the next plant we're going to talk about is red clover. Red clover is native to Europe and Asia. It's become naturalized in North America, and it is a very common garden weed. Red clover contains natural salicylates, that are very similar to those found in aspirin, very similar to salicylic acid, and are effective at relieving pain, inflammation, reducing fever, and helping to prevent blood clots. It is a mild blood thinner, kind of like taking a baby aspirin. So for men's health, red clover contains high concentrations of the ester beta-cetosterol. Many studies have shown that beta-cetosterol, when taken regularly, can actually lower blood cholesterol, and in men can greatly help to prevent prostate cancer and inhibit the growth of prostate tumors. Beta-cetosterol has been shown in a study by the Department of Veterans Affairs to reduce the symptoms of something called benign prostatic hyperplasia, improving urinary flow in men tested. When men become older, sometimes their prostates can become enlarged, and this can block urinary flow. And so red clover and the beta-cetosterol that's in red clover can help to reduce the size of the prostate and allow for proper urinary flow. Now, you need to speak to your doctor before taking red clover as a source of beta-cetosterol, as other natural active ingredients in red clover may have testosterone reducing effects as well. So if you have a chronically low testosterone, and that's negatively affecting your life, or could negatively affect your life, you should not use red clover for that, because it will reduce testosterone more. So red clover for women's health. Red clover has traditionally been used as a medicinal supplement to relieve symptoms of menopause. Combined with the blood thinning properties of red clover, isoflavones present in red clover tea were shown by Mount Sinai in New York to reduce hot flashes and night sweats due to their estrogen-like effects. So the the estrogen-like isoflavonoids that are inside of red clover are very useful for menopause because they mimic estrogen. But those with hormone sensitive conditions such as breast cancer, ovarian cancer, or if you're at risk of those things, or endometriosis, should consult their doctor before taking red clover because of its estrogenic activity. The same reasons that you should be always checking with your doctor for anything else. If this reacts negatively to something else that you're trying to treat, then it's not the right thing to do. Next plant we're going to talk about is mullein. It's another very common plant that loves concrete. It's grown all over the world. Commonly found along ditches and roadways, mullein has been used for thousands of years as a remedy for lung health. The first documented use of mullein for medicinal use can be ascribed to Dioscorides over 2,000 years ago in his work De Materia Medica, one of the foundational texts of modern medicine. He encouraged drinking mullein tea to help recover the lungs from pulmonary disease. Mullein is really good for strengthening the lungs, and it's nice to use after you've had a cold, when you're recovering, when your lungs are recovering from some sort of pulmonary distress. The tea of mullein is really, really useful for that. Mullein contains over 46 use groups of bioactive compounds. Most notably mucilage, saponins, coumarins, and glycosides. Some of the compounds that have received attention in the scientific literature are verbascose, verbascicide, verbascarol, rotenone, mucilage, heptose, coumarin, acuben, and ascorbic acid, in addition to the minerals calcium, potassium, iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, and selenium, including a lot of chemicals like manganese that are difficult to get into your diet. So mullein tea. The use of an infusion of mullein in water for pulmonary health. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in mullein. Mulleine's really good for your body. I'll upload this or Alex will have this, and she can upload it to the website. So you'll be able to go through and see all the different bioactive compounds that are in mullein. I always recommend the National Library of Medicine if you're going to go out and look up what each of those do, or what is present, what each of those is present in as a prescription drug or a over-the-counter drug. The use of an infusion in mullein for pulmonary health has been included in numerous versions of the National Formulary for the American Pharmaceutical Association since the 1906 third edition. To make an infusion of mullein, simply add 1 teaspoon of dried mullein leaves or flowers to boiling water and steep for 10 to 15 minutes before drinking. You can drink the tea 3 to 4 times a day to improve respiratory function or to help recover the lungs from a cold, bronchitis, or pneumonia. But it's a really good plant for lung health. It's a really good plant if you're trying to recover from smoking. It's good for that. So the next thing we're going to talk about is chickweed. Chickweed is these cute little flowers right here with these opposite facing leaves, and they form these little whorls like this. It's another common garden weed. It grows all over North America. It was introduced from Europe. It's a non-native plant. Grows everywhere from suburbs to mountain forests, and it's been used as a medicinal plant for centuries in Europe. Several studies in the US National Library of Medicine have shown that digestive inhibiting enzymes in chickweed juice have been shown to delay the absorption of dietary fats and carbs, assisting in weight loss and helping to prevent obesity. So if you're trying to keep weight off, or you're trying to prevent the gaining of more weight, chickweed is a really good plant for that. Other studies have shown that chickweed is an effective expectorant. An expectorant helps you to cough better. It helps to break up thick mucus caused by allergies or sinus infection, thin that mucus out so that when you cough, you are actually moving things around instead of just it all staying in one place and your sinuses are all full of goop. One review published by the National Institute of Health found that phytochemicals found in chickweed have antiviral activity, and research is currently being done in its usefulness in treating patients suffering from COVID-19. And I included the little National Institute of Health article there. National Institute of Health article there, so people could go read that study if they want. a green chickweed smoothie. So if you want to get some of the use of that chickweed in keeping weight off or trying to lose weight by preventing the uptake of carbohydrates into the body, a green chickweed smoothie is a nice way to do that. You can just start your morning with it or have one with your lunch. 3 cups of plain yogurt, 2 cups of chopped fresh chickweed, 2 cups of fresh or frozen pineapple, a cup and a half of frozen peaches, and an avocado. Place everything in a blender, blend it on high until smooth, pour and enjoy. This will make 3 to 4 large cups. So you can prep them for the day too that way. Cool, so that's chickweed. Next, we're going to talk about alder. Alder is a tree native to the west coast of the United States, but it's grown throughout North America as an ornamental due to its hanging fruits called catkins. That's these little guys. I'm sure that you have seen these growing around in whatever town that you live in North America. They are absolutely everywhere. But they are actually from North America. They're just from the West Coast. A decoction of the bark of the alder tree was first described as a medicinal plant by the Blackfoot First Nations tribe as a treatment for insect bites and to be taken for internal injuries and diarrhea. Modern scientific studies have confirmed that in addition to being a useful anti-inflammatory, astringent, and gastric antispasmodic, alder bark contains butylenic acid and lupeol, which has been shown to suppress some tumor activity and cause apoptic cell death in cancer cells. So what this plant is really good for is internal injury. So it's an anti-inflammatory, astringent, and gastric antispasmodic. So for ulcers or people with ulcerative colitis, this is a pretty useful plant because it can stop internal bleeding in the stomach, and it relaxes the stomach muscles. It's a gastric antispasmodic, so it prevents spasming of the gastric muscles. And that anti-inflammatory property of alder is also nice for that because, you know, it's keeping some of that pain away for people that have ulcers or bleeding bowels. So alder bark tincture is probably the best way to use this plant. You'll take the dried inner bark of alder. This is the part of the bark that you want, is this red bark in here. You'll fill your jar with or dropper bottle 1/3 of the way up to the top with your bark, and then fill the rest of the way up with alcohol. Leave it to steep for several days until the mixture turns a deep red and begins to smell different. It's going to begin to smell like an alder tree. Strain out the solids and return it to the jar. This tincture can last in the state for many, many years. To use it, simply fill a pipette and drop it directly on the tongue. Now, to warn you, it's very astringent. It will dry out your tongue immediately. You want to take this with lots and lots of water, and it's useful for stomach aches, diarrhea, and internal injury. Next plant we're going to talk about is Pipsissewa. Can you just add it to water? The tincture, yes, you could just add it right to water. So Pipsissewa is native to the shady coniferous forests in North America. It's used in many different First Nations folkloric medicine practice as a remedy for kidney stones. Pipsissewa is a powerful diuretic, and that is what it is used for. What that means is it induces urination. So it's helpful for cleansing out the urinary tract. It could be useful for passing kidney stones. It can be helpful for relieving urinary tract infections, but you want to keep in mind that if you have a urinary tract infection that is causing painful urination, you may not want to induce more urination. So use that at your discretion. but that is what this plant does, is it makes you pee more. Pipsissewa also contains chemophyllin. It's a powerful naturally occurring quinone that was shown by the British Industrial Biological Research Association to help prevent breast cancer. So they put out a study showing that regular use of Pipsissewa helps prevent breast cancer because it contains this chemophyllin. Pipsissewa, the name is actually the Cree onomatopoeia for peeing. And that's what you use it for. One of the best ways to use Pipsissewa is as a syrup. This is a very old recipe from kind of the Old West snake oil salesman of North America that would probably try to sell this to you and tell you it cures absolutely everything. But in reality, it just helps regulate the body by making you pee more. So 4 ounces of fresh Pipsissewa leaves, 8 ounces of water, and 3/4 pounds of sugar. So you'll take the water and the leaves and put them in a food processor until the leaves are completely destroyed. Let that mixture stand for 36 hours. That'll infuse all of that water with the Pipsissewa. Strain it until 1 pint of liquid is obtained. Put that liquid in a pot and simmer it until it's reduced by 50%. What that does is it concentrates all of that Pipsissewa solution. Then you dissolve the sugar into the liquid and bottle it. Take 1 to 2 teaspoons as needed to induce urination and soothe the urinary tract. Make sure you take this with plenty of water, as it will make you pee. So the next plant we're going to talk about is another plant that grows absolutely everywhere, loves sidewalks. That is prickly lettuce. So I'm sure you've seen this plant growing all over the place. This is actually a type of wild lettuce. So prickly lettuce has a weird history in natural medicine. It was once used as a remedy for nymphomania in women and was called opium lettuce in the past. Prickly lettuce is a common garden weed whose sap is used to produce a light painkiller called lacticarium. So the substance attributed to the pain relieving qualities of prickly lettuce is called lacticarium. Lacticarium, derived from prickly lettuce, has been shown to be an effective non-narcotic pain reliever with no known drug interactions, acting similarly to opioids, albeit with much milder effects and no known addictive side effects. I'm sure it's absolutely the exact same stuff that your dad used to make you pull up from the lawn, Lincoln. It grows everywhere and it's very, very hardy. So it likes to take over entire lawns and entire gardens. If you have seen earlier, like in the summer, there was this TikTok trend and Instagram trend of making lettuce water, and then you would pass out from drinking lettuce water. And while some lacticarium exists in store-bought like romaine lettuce, this is actually the lettuce that they probably, like, that trend probably started with someone reading like an herbology book. And that's a common way to use prickly lettuce, which is this plant. And so if you want to try that lettuce trend, this is actually the plant that you should have been using. So how to use wild lettuce? There's 3 different ways. You can use it as a tincture. Wild lettuce tincture can be prepared by filling a jar more than halfway full with finely chopped leaves and stem and soaking it in 100 proof alcohol such as Everclear for several weeks. Using the tincture is going to have a mild sedative effect and a strong pain relieving effect. Again, this as a plant acts similar to an opioid. You can ingest as a strong tea. Ingesting it as a tea provides the most gentle pain relieving qualities and can be useful for headaches or muscle pain. You simply infuse chopped or dried wild lettuce leaves in boiling water for about 15 minutes. That's going to be the mildest way to use wild lettuce. And then A lot of people swear by smoking the dried plant material. Dried wild lettuce can be smoked in a pipe to achieve pain relieving effects, although care must be taken, as absolutely no inhalation of smoke is ever good for the lungs, regardless of the material combusted. And so I would always recommend using either a tincture or strong tea. And the strong tea would effectively be lettuce water. So usnea. Usnea is not actually a plant, but a lichen, which is a relationship between an algae and a fungus. Usnea grows from the bark of evergreen trees, such as spruce or pine, and the best way to positively identify usnea from other plants that are similar beard lichens like this, like Spanish moss, is to gently pull apart the strands, which would be like this right here, these little central veiny pieces. So pull apart a strand and see that it has a stretchy white center core. Usnea is the only beard lichen with a white core. So that will tell you you have the right plant. It has powerful antibiotic and antiviral properties and can help to bolster the immune system as a tincture. The active ingredient for usnea is usnic acid, which is where it gets its name. The other thing that you can do with usnea tincture and as a powerful antibiotic and antiviral is use it to clean surfaces. And it's very useful for that. You can make the tincture much, much stronger and concentrated that way, like fill an entire jar up with usnea and then fill it with alcohol, let that sit for a while, and then use it just raw on surfaces to kill off anything growing on there. So it's nice for like cleaning the kitchen. All right. Next we have self-heal. Self-heal, or Prunella vulgaris, is a common perennial wildflower that's native to most temperate environments. It's native all over the world. It just sort of is a very old plant, including Asia, Africa, and North America, and it's been naturalized in Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii. It's one of the most widely studied plants in modern herbal medicine due to its widespread use worldwide as a medicinal for thousands of years. And it's still being studied today. A 2012 study published in Food and Nutrition Sciences showed that the rosmaric acid in self-heal acts as a strong anti-inflammatory painkiller. In 2009, a study published by the Biology of Reproduction observed that a tea made from self-heal exhibits a strong anti-estrogenic activity, making it useful in therapeutic treatment of endometriosis, as well as in breast and uterine cancers. A 2004 study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology observed that polysaccharides present in self-heal have antiviral properties, and specifically that you can downregulate the expression of herpes simplex virus, that it can downregulate the expression of herpes simplex virus. Many herbal cold sore memories contain self-heal extract for that purpose. A 2012 study published in the Journal of Microbiology, Immunology, and Infection observed that self-heal is a rich source of biofilm disrupting compounds that topically can help to prevent infection and internally can help to prevent infection in chronic gastric ailments such as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. So, how to prepare self-heal for medicinal use? The primary component of the plant used in herbal medicine is the flower heads, which can be dried out in a dehydrator or left on a drying rack or windowsill for several days. This is what the dried flower heads then look like. You can use it as a salve to apply self-heal topically for infection prevention or to ease symptoms of herpes simplex virus. A salve is your best bet. To prepare a salve of self-heal, infuse dried flowers over several weeks in a skin-safe carrier oil such as jojoba. After the oil is infused, In a double boiler, slowly add grated beeswax until it is fully dissolved and transfer to small jars in a cool, dark place. As a tea, so for taking self-heal internally for its estrogenic, anti-inflammatory, or biofilm disrupting effects, can be done with a simple water infusion or herbal tea. Add fresh or dried flowers to boiling water and steep for roughly 10 to 15 minutes. Or you can use it as a tincture. Tinctures are a great way to get the effects of internally taking self-heal without brewing a pot of tea every single time. You infuse dried self-heal flowers in high-proof alcohol such as Everclear at room temperature for 3 to 5 weeks. Gently shake the bottle every few days. And that is the last slide in our presentation, guys. Do we have any questions? Anything we want to go over again? Cool. Well, I'm going to let you guys go then.
Thanks, Dorian.
No problem. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.
You too.
See ya.
Thank you so much, Dorian.
No problem.